I'm sure I'm not alone in my frustration. You know, we pay taxes.
Right.
I pay a whole lot of taxes. And I'm happy to pay taxes. You know, I pay taxes in a district that I don't have any children in the school. I want everybody to have great services. I'll pay taxes. I'm gonna pay taxes. But I feel like, you know, Congress has become a cesspool of people who crave power, who do nothing, and they don't work for the people that sent them there. So you have insider trading. People go into Congress broke, busted, disgusted. They leave millionaires. You have people in Congress that have been there for 60 years. You got people 87 years old wanting to run again because the type of generational wealth you can build in Congress is unmatched anywhere in the world. To be able to insider trade legally, I don't think Congress people, and there's a bill that Ossoff, I think, is putting forward to prevent people in Congress from trading in the stock market. Because I do think it's a conflict of interest, because if you can be lobbied, if you can have people give you gifts to do things, if you can have people hand you legislation, if you can have people, you know, pull on you to sign over checks like they did in this case, there's no accountability, right? And as a citizen who pays taxes, what's our recourse? You know, how do we get a refund? Do we get a refund for this? So you gave out $3.2 billion across the country without any way of checking, any way of knowing whether that money is well spent.
No, it was horrible. It was the most disgraceful waste of taxpayer money with Congress's approval, because I testified before Congress and said, this makes no sense. And they said, basically, the law requires that you do it. We're not changing the law. And so to comply with the law, we met the deadline and distributed $3 billion within about 6 months. And see, the crime, what caused me to resign, I was appointed to a 4-year term. I resigned after 15 months. I announced my resignation after 12 months because the Democrats and the Republicans in position of power agree on those things from which they all benefit personally. And that's what bothers me. And what bothers me today is that while it looks like there's this big divide between Democrats and Republicans, you know that Sinema and Manchin are not the only two Democrats that are holding up Biden's agenda and who stand against voting rights, because increasingly Black voters and brown voters and poor voters are growing in number and becoming more discerning in the people that we vote for.
Mm-hmm. So wouldn't that make you step your game up? I don't know. I was raised, you know, that you want to compete, you want to compete against the best, you want to be the best. To be the best, you got to be. My father taught me that. 7 years old, he's teaching me how to play cards. If you beat me, it's because you beat me. I'm not going to let you beat me. I mean, I'm 7, like no mercy. He taught me how to play cards and commenced to whipping my ass every single time and Scrabble, same thing. And I remember the day that I beat him. I remember it because it was such a victory, right? Because I knew he didn't let me win, you know, but I had to come up with schemes and devise plans and study this dictionary and like go through the paces to be great, which is why today I'm one of the most competitive. It's horrible too. It's ugly actually, but I, you know, you're going to have to beat me, you know, but I feel like we have a nation of mediocrity where the standard is not, there's no standard of excellence. It's like, okay, I don't have to do much. And I feel like it's almost like the nation's edict to do less, to do the least you can do and get as much as you can. And I don't think that's acceptable.
We certainly are living through a dumbed down environment culturally, and it's affecting us globally. It's why we're having so much trouble with this little virus when there are countries like, I got an email from someone, I think it was Liberia, and they said, we don't have any COVID here, none. I mean, countries that we look down on generally are able to master certain things that we can't master. I mean, you're talking about voting. I went to Europe to represent America at an international conference on voting while I was in office, 2004. When I get there, I discover that Mexico, that India, that Eastern European countries that just became democracies have more efficient and effective voting systems than we do in America. It was embarrassing.
Well, some would say that's on purpose, right? So my job here is to make sure that everyone listening has all of the tools, all of the weapons, everything that they need in their arsenal to build the best life possible, right? I believe that voting is our only way forward politically in this country. So we have to vote, even if we have to hold our noses and do it, even if we don't like the candidates, we can't sit on the sidelines. It's the one thing we have to do, which means we also then understand that they don't want us to vote. So we have to fight to get our rights to vote and do all of the things. So voter ID, get an ID. You know, if they don't want you to get water, make sure you have stations set up so that people can, get water, hold places in line. We got to do everything we need to do because they don't want us to vote. So we have to vote. At the same time, we have to start to elect people who are going to do the right thing, right? Once they get there. And we have to change the culture. But the cultural change has to start with us. Right. I believe. So you resign and you sit here now as an elder statesman. I'm gonna ask this question of just about everybody that comes on. You've seen a lot. You were Secretary of State for New Jersey, Secretary of State so you understand the inner workings of politics and what it can do when it's working and what it can't do when it's not working. Are you optimistic about where we are as a nation, and what solutions do you see, Dr. Soaries, in terms of what we can do to make it better?
Well, I'm optimistic because if you look back 50 years and the obstacles that we faced, when you look at the obstacles that the civil rights movement faced, when you look at what they did to the Black Panthers, I mean, they just killed Black Panthers in public, in open, just killed them. And
incarcerated them. Some are still in jail.
And put them in jail. Some are still in jail. Rap Brown is still in jail. When you look at how blatant the oppression of our past was, yet we still have had some breakthroughs. We still had some victories. I think voices like yours on stations like these, I think people like Stacey Abrams, who I think is just the Harriet Tubman of our day, I think they are just bright spots. They are young entertainers, they're young pastors who are just determined to keep the fire burning. And what has proven to be true is that while the majority of us aren't activists and the majority of us don't march, and the majority of us aren't philanthropists, we've been able to have a remnant of our people that have been empowered by a spirit that has transcended all of our oppression, and we end up on our feet. So I'm optimistic just based on that historical reality that Dr. King was right. Truth crushed to the ground will rise again.
All right, I'm gonna sit in that. 866-801-8255. It looks like one of the largest student funders is going to forgive $1.8 billion in student loan debt. Looks like that's about to happen at the exact same.
Karen, remember that was as a result of a lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
And it was a settlement that did not require their admission of guilt at all. And at the end of the day, what that equals for the individual is $260.
Oh, so the headline is Navient to pay $1.85 billion in student loan debt settlement, but it doesn't say that's 200. What is it?
$260. That means that Navient, if you have a loan and Navient is your servicer, they will reduce your $25,000 student loan debt by $260.
Oh, that's some bull crap. Okay. And that should be the headline.
Right.
That's some bull crap. Oh, all right. So it was a class action lawsuit. Look at that. Right. 350,000 student borrowers they've sued. Oh, this is crazy. And I think, the whole cost of going to school is crazy to the point that now 1 million fewer students enrolled in college. This is the lowest enrollment in 50 years. It used to be, that in our household, in my neighborhood, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a good job. Getting a degree was, like you had to do it. It was part of your checklist. Now I'm seeing getting a degree is not part of the checklist. And as we start talking about finances and money and jobs and things, I, as an educator, I teach at Hunter College. We're about to start up in a couple of weeks. I've been telling my students from day one, don't stay in here too long. Don't be on that 6-7 year plan, get in and get out. Don't spend up a whole lot of money, get as many grants as you can get because the world is out there. Don't hide out in here, racking up debt that you won't be able to pay back because it's not worth it. Especially y'all are media majors. I don't know what you do with that. in a world where media is not even defined anymore. Like, you're not going to get a 6-figure job when you get out of college to pay this debt. So unless you're majoring in biology or chemistry or doing something in the healthcare field where you're going to get that money back, get the hell out of school quickly. That's what I've been telling my students for the last 19 years. I'm now thinking, why do they even need a degree? I've just hired a bunch of people. I don't even know if they have degrees. I just know they have the skills to do the work. I don't know whether they have a degree. I didn't ask for their diploma and their GPA. Can you do the work? Yes. Okay. And they're doing the work and I pay them.
Well, and also, Karen, in addition to what you're saying, there is a coalition of corporate CEOs that have signed a pact agreeing to hire people without college degrees.
So you're not surprised that, we are losing. And what is this doing to society, though? So there's a larger question there. And if you're somebody who's raising, because, for Black people in particular, and Black people from a certain socioeconomic background, we have to go to college, and Black women are the most degreed of any demographic in this country because it's been drilled into our heads. But is that the right message? And has that saddled us with the kind of debt that has made it impossible for us to be truly free? We're talking with DeForest Soaries. Some of you know him as Buster Soaries. Dr. Soaries is here. He has several books, and he'll just drop a book the way like Drake will drop an album in the middle of the night, like no fanfare. There'll be no pre anything. It's just like, yeah, I just put this book out yesterday, and I'm like, how? What? What? I don't understand. and sure enough, it'll be out, and you just write books like nothing. You have a bunch of books. Your last book that I've really loved, and you've had a couple since, is Say Yes to No Debt. I love that book because we start off the year, last 7 years is like save your money, save 10,000, save 25,000, get to 50,000, and then let's talk about investing. So we've had people want to talk about investing, but to even get to a point where you can invest, we got to get out of debt. So this year I want people to get out of car debt, and if they can, this is the tough one, mortgage, put together a plan to get out of mortgage, because within the word mortgage is the word death.
Right.
Like there, and I know we have been conditioned to have these elaborate homes and pay, and the interest rate now is up, but it puts us in a position where we never really have true ownership. In your first chapter, I think the introduction to Say Yes to Less Debt, to No Debt, 12 Steps to Financial Freedom. In the introduction, you have Debt is Slavery. That's the title. I've been saying debt is of the devil, which I think would be more appropriate for you to say as a pastor. But talk about why consumer debt, the new slavery, was your introduction, and explain to us why it is slavery to you.
Well, what's embarrassing for me is that I was a pastor for years before I even knew the Bible had a verse that said the borrower is slave to the lender. Here I am preaching about going to heaven, and here I am admonishing white people for owning Black slaves, which was against our will, of course, and then only to discover that I had signed up for slavery and celebrated it when I got my first credit card. So debt is slavery because you've yielded control, in this case, of your finances to someone else. That's what slavery is. Slavery is when the owner has the power to determine the quality of life of the slave. And when African Americans came out of physical slavery in this country, we went to something called sharecropping. Many of the slaves couldn't leave the plantation. Many slaves didn't have the access to opportunity, so they stayed right there. They weren't slaves, but they were sharecroppers. And a sharecropper was a system where you basically never got out of debt. You worked the crops on someone else's land, and every year your yield was less than you owed to the owner. So we went from slavery to sharecropping to kind of paying on time, as we called it, to credit cards. And the reality is that credit cards and other kinds of consumer debt eats away at our income. It prevents us from saving. I got an email from a woman this morning asking, if I'm drowning in debt, should I be tithing? Well, how can you give 10% of what you earn to the church if your living expenses are 150% of what you bring in? And I know pastors hate me for saying this, but some people cannot afford to tithe. Can you imagine telling somebody, give me your pastor 10% of your income, and then next month you got to come back to me to help pay your rent because you didn't have enough money to pay. We need a system that makes sense. It makes sense financially, it makes sense theologically. So debt becomes slavery because it never goes away. And depending on your credit score, people can charge you whatever they want to. And when people can charge you whatever they want to for a car, for a mortgage, they will tell you straight. If your credit score is 620, you pay this much interest. If your credit score is 720, you pay that much interest. Who wants to yield control of what happens with their hard-earned money to a third party? And the third party doesn't need your money. We're making Citibank, Wells Fargo, Visa, MasterCard rich, while many of us, and I'm not talking about low-income people, the data shows that middle-income people, Black and white, but I'm concerned about us, people making six-figure salaries are 2 paychecks away from losing their house, losing their apartment, losing their car, and losing their stability. So what we want, and that's the name of the book, we want people to begin thinking and focusing on what life can and should be like without debt. Now, you notice the book doesn't say yes to no credit. Credit is a strategy that can be used to create wealth. Debt is when you are borrowing money to support a lifestyle you otherwise could not afford.
Pause there. 866-801-8255. We're gonna have this conversation. Okay. And I just a point, because I'm in a space where words are powerful. I want to be mindful of, everything that comes out of our mouths. We were never slaves. We were enslaved. Something happened to us. We were always human beings. And it's a hard thing. Once you hear it, I can't unhear it. Like, it puts it in a category of like, these were not humans. No, we were human. Our ancestors were human. Something was done to them. They were enslaved. And even you think about, because I read the, Mercer Berenderin's book, The Color of Money. You think about people in the Civil War, soldiers who left plantations to fight for the Union, and then they set up a bank and they put their money, their earnings in that bank. And they had saved millions of dollars, Dr. Soaries, only to hand the stewardship of that bank over to some well-meaning white people, and I'm putting up air quotes because I don't think they were well-meaning, who did the riskiest things that they could with that money and lost these people. You think about a person that walked off of a plantation, fought for their own freedom and the freedom of their brothers and sisters, put money in a bank that they were promised was going to be well taken care of, only to lose all their money. So just like right now we have vaccine distrust because of Tuskegee, we also have distrust of banks, which is why some of us are unbanked, even if we don't have to be unbanked, because we don't trust the banks. Most of us are not in the stock market because we don't trust the stock market. We don't trust this country because this country has a history of pulling the rug from under Black people in particular. That's right. And so how do we build that trust back with ourselves?
That's right. Black distrust in white institutions is rooted in history, not mythology. And it's not that long ago. My great grandmother lost money in the Freedmen's Bank. So let's not act like this is ancient history, back in biblical days. We're talking about since the 1900s. That's when that happened. So we need to understand, and many of us don't even know why we don't trust, but it's rooted in history. Yeah. But we don't have to go back to the Freedmen's Bank. The reality is more Black people lost our homes during the mortgage crisis from 2008 to 2015 than any other group. Almost all of our wealth as a community was lost in the foreclosure crisis because our wealth was in the equity in our houses. So our distrust for vaccine, even though I'm pro-vaccine, I'm vaccinated, I'm boosted, I understand Black distrust. And the only way to gain trust is to have successes, small successes, that we can demonstrate that there are still possible ways to be victorious and to win despite the systems that are yet to be challenged or changed.
So let's blueprint this. I say debt is of the devil. And I was fighting this, especially the mortgage debt. I remember having Chris Hogan on here, and I'll tell this story over and over again. He was like, all right, you got to get rid of your mortgage. And I was like, what? I could write that off, right? I'm like, that's good debt. And then they passed a law that I can't write off the whole thing, right? Now I can't
right.
write off the whole thing. And
That's
if you have
right.
multiple homes, forget about it, right? So it's not even a benefit that much. And he said, but think about that. All that equity that you talked about, if more of us considered or thought about, and not that we just got bad loans, because I also had a couple of subprime loans along the way, which I didn't deserve to have. That's another thing. And I'm working with Chase right now to figure out how we can combat that, because why do we always get those bum loans? Well, we know why. But how should we be thinking? Let's start to recondition. All right. Not to judge anybody or what have you, but the first thing they do is they come to the college campuses, right, with the credit cards. And what young person is not going to get a credit card that will allow them to buy whatever they want? They're in school and away from parents. It's crazy. So help us, give us the blueprint, Dr. Soaries.
Well, if our focus is on wealth, and we understand that wealth is measured by how much you own, subtracted by how much you owe, then it's contradictory to say, on the one hand, I want to develop wealth, and on the other hand, to continue to pile up more and more debt. When at the end of your life, when you determine your net worth, if you have something to leave behind, the less you owe, the more you own. So every dollar of debt that you pay down, you are adding $1 of wealth to your net worth. The other reality is this: we are a people who, in various forms and on various levels, have been consistent in resisting the forces that oppress us ever since we got here. Contrary to some of the sympathizers for slavery, Black people never embraced being enslaved. Now, we didn't all agree on strategy. Some believed in grinding up a glass and putting it in master's food. Some decided to kind of stick it out and be accommodationist. Some tried to buy ourselves out, but we did something. As a people, we have been resistors of forces that oppress us, which means that we should also resist the idea that in certain neighborhoods in this country, there are no supermarkets, but there are 5 payday loan stores that charge 400% and 500% interest. We should resist the idea that we will pay 18 to 24 to 28% interest to buy things that we don't need right now. So I believe that our freedom from debt movement is a resistance movement. In the same way we resisted the oppression of the past, we should resist the fact that we live in an oppressive financial system, and unless we rise above it, we will be victims of it.
866-801-8255. Is there anyone in debt today? Anyone in debt feeling like there's no way out? We're going to have this discussion for the rest of the year and probably beyond. And I'm going to have many guests on to talk about this. But if you are in debt right now and you feel like there's no way out, and I'm the pandemic has been both a blessing and a curse for some people, because there's been a lot of relief packages, a lot of ability to go get money or to apply for money, especially if you're a small business. And then there were, relief checks for people who, unemployment longer than expected. People were able to collect money and not have to go out in the streets, which is great. But that time is coming to an end. And I feel like, we're going to start to see the impact of that as there's also this great resignation going on. I don't think these two things can be sustained. Something's going to happen. But tell us your story. You were once heavily in debt. Many people may not know it because you don't talk about it often on your show on Sundays.
Well, I write about it in all of my books. I got my first credit card at 18 and I didn't apply for it. Back in those days, they would send you credit cards whether you asked for it or not. And it was to buy gasoline. In fact, it was to buy Gulf gasoline. And I thought it was miraculous because I lived 1 block from a Gulf gas station. I didn't realize then, what many people don't realize now, is that they study us, they know where we live. And had that gas station been a Shell station, I'd have gotten a Shell card. That's a subject of a different show. But the fact is, I got that gas card and I started charging my gas instead of buying my gas. And when I bought gas, I could drive all week long on $1 worth of gas. When I charged it on my credit card, I didn't track how much I was spending, and I was driving everywhere. And by the end of the month, I'd spent $200 on gas. And that was the beginning of 13 years, Karen, of gas cards, of travel cards, of furniture charges, to the point where by my mid-20s, I had so much debt for cars and furniture and all of that, I couldn't even make the minimum payment. So I stopped opening my mail. You know, when Visa sends you a letter and you know you owe them 3 months payments, you know it's not a get well card. They want their money. So why open the letter if you know you don't have the money? So I had a whole stack of envelopes in the corner, and then they started hiring people to call me to collect their bills. And one night, one woman called me and yelled at me so bad. I said, "Woman, hold it. You're taking this thing too personally. You act like I owe you money. I don't owe you a dime. I owe the company money. You ought to be thanking me, because if I paid my bills on time, you wouldn't have a job." I mean, I was deep in it, right? And that went on for 13 years. Even as a pastor, I was drowning in debt. I was in so much debt, I didn't tithe to the church. I taught them to tithe, because I had a Cadillac that I bought when I became a preacher, because I thought preachers bought Cadillacs. I had nice clothes. I was going to restaurants. I was a bachelor. So I was living as if I made much more than I did, because I had these credit cards. In my year 13 of living like this, paying credit card bills with credit cards, my Black grandmother died. My father's mother, who had 6 children, an invalid husband. She had a 6th grade education. This was in the 1900s. And when she died, she left us 3 houses paid for. House number 1 went to my aunt. House number 2 went to my uncle. House number 3 was split between me and my other uncle. And so the first real estate I inherited was from my grandmother, who had no education and no civil rights. And her husband had a stroke after their 6th child, so he couldn't work to support her. And I sat at my grandmother's grave. Shame on me if I died today, all I'd have to leave behind is credit card bills. And my Black grandmother left me 50% of real estate. And today the house I live in is because of the money I've made off real estate since my grandmother gave me that house. And I decided then to change my life. I sold my Cadillac and bought a used Honda. I moved out of my bachelor apartment to my mother's house, slept in a sleeping bag. I paid off all my bills. I got out of debt. And by the time I got married, I was debt free.
You slept in a sleeping bag in your mother's house?
While I was a pastor. My members didn't know it, but my mom
what
didn't
kind
have
of pride? What kind of pride did you have to swallow to go back home?
Listen, it was better than having checks bounce. What kind of pride did I have to swallow to, I was a civil rights activist. You know that. I worked for Jesse Jackson. I'm in the newspapers. I'm on Gil Noble's show, telling it like it is, to go home to bill collectors. And when my father died, when my mother was 44, he was 47. If he didn't have life insurance, my mother would have been homeless, because I didn't have $1 to buy her a sandwich. I was completely broke. In the newspapers, giving speeches, speaking truth to power. I was woke, but I was broke.